So, my name is Stefan Tompson, and this is a series of podcasts for the Institute of New Europe about the 3Cs initiative. And today I'm speaking with Marek Dietl, the head of the Warsaw Stock Exchange. Marek, perhaps we could start with a brief introduction about you, about who you are, your work. That would be a nice starting point.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and thank you very much for having me on this podcast series. It's really a pleasure and really important for us to be part of this 3Cs initiative as Warsaw Stock Exchange. Your question is what the CEO of the Warsaw Stock Exchange does. So basically, my main job is to talk to issuers and investors as stock exchanges try to connect both sides. We are so-called two-sided markets. On one hand, we have issuers, companies, and on the other side, we have investors. And my particular role is to talk to our global investors. And from this point, I can tell you that this 3Cs initiative is extremely important. If you can, our model investors is based in New York or in Hong Kong, so roughly 15,000 kilometers away from Warsaw. And if you look at the world map and you put in the center, let's say Hong Kong or New York, you see Poland as a relatively small country. Smaller than it is in reality, but simply when we use maps to present a globe, the proportions are distorted. And from perspective of this investor, it's Poland and Warsaw itself is a relatively small exchange. From the perspective of the region, when we talk about even 13 countries, so 12 countries of 3Cs initiative plus Greece. From our perspective, it would be better if the Greece were included in the 3Cs initiative. We have 51% market share in the trading volume. So from the Hong Kong investors, US investors, we have a very small exchange. From the perspective of the region, we are relatively big. We are twice as big as Vienna Stock Exchange, 4 times bigger than Athens Stock Exchange, 8 times bigger than Budapest Stock Exchange. Okay, but from the perspective of this global investors, it's really difficult to justify to invest time in so small market as the Polish market. But on the other hand, there is a very nice story behind the growth of the eastbound of the European Union. So you have a set of mixed feelings if you were an investor. So on the one hand, you want to participate in this economic success of this region, including Austria, which even in Austria, people say, economists say, Osto-Europa effect. It means effect of Eastern Europe. So opening of the Central and Eastern Europe was very beneficial for Austrian economy. So you would like to be part of this success story. On the other hand, I don't know how to do this and in an effective manner. Yeah? So either you select 1 to 3 companies from the region based on the market capitalization and free float, so and liquidity, let's say, simplistically, and then you have relatively limited exposure to the particular industries and particular companies, and they might not develop faster than their peers in the West because of the industry of whatever competitive edge or whatever. Or you go for passive investment, meaning that you invest in an index fund or ETF or whatever, but then you would like to have a full scope of the 3Cs countries to see some kind of diversification between the industries, countries, and so on. But all in all, you would expect a higher return than in the highly developed countries. And then it's again our role in our 3Cs initiative. There are 2 markets which have this developed status, capital markets. So they are this in this most advanced form is Vienna and Warsaw. So basically, when the investors have a limit to invest only in the developed markets because of the infrastructure, institutional setup of the capital market, they go for the synthetic instruments like ETFs or index funds, which are listed on Vienna or Warsaw. So when I can approach investors sector in, let's say, New York or in west of the US or somewhere in Asia. For me, it's much more handy if I can speak about the region, and I give data on the size of the region than of Poland alone. So basically, Free Seas initiative is extremely helpful in my everyday job.
Because the story of Polish growth is becoming. I mean, it's a fairly well known story to us Poles. I mean, 27 years of uninterrupted economic growth from 1992 to 2019, interrupted only by COVID. Something like 3.4% average growth per annum. So there is this incredible growth that's happened in the last 3 decades. What's the state of the what's less well known to Poles, I think, and to the broader region is the stories of the smaller countries around us. Obviously, Poland is the biggest country in Central and Eastern Europe. It's the most meaningful one in terms of population, in terms of economy. What are the broad outlines of what are the sort of the broad brushstrokes of the story of the rest of Central and Eastern Europe, and more importantly, what are the stories of the sort of the trading and the economic ties between those countries? Because there's from all the other interviews that I've had, one of the recurring elements has been is what an important trading partner Germany is, much less so than the importance of our own closest neighbors to our own economy.
So Stefan, you actually touched a lot of points. So
Sorry,
let
I
me
know it's a broad
slice
story.
into pieces. So basically, if you look at the map of Europe, or let's say even limit ourselves to European Union, you will see, and with the and this is a temperature map, so showing, let's say, green if there was high growth, and to the red if was less growth over the last 20 years or something. You will immediately spot that there is Ireland in the west, which was growing very, very nicely in the European Union, and Free Seas Initiative countries, faster or less fast, but way, way over performing the Western European peers. So basically, it's a region of high growth, and it counts for every country. There, we don't have, I think, enough time to go to every single economy, but there are different drivers of the growth. So there are countries like Czechia, Slovakia, Hungary, which were growing through a relatively high level of investment to the GDP, and with the very tight links to the Western Europe, especially automotive industry and other industries. There are some countries which were growing more on the consumption side, and there is also Poland with this growth, which is very diverse. So we didn't have as high level of investment to GDP as mentioned countries like Czechia and so on. But when you look at the industries with highest value added, we had actually very high investment there. So our investments were more targeted, and we built up economy which is very diverse. But from the perspective of the investors, there's growth is one thing, and other is stock of capital and how the capital is actually controlled. And in this region, Poland is not an exception. In every country, almost every country, over 1/3 of the GDP is produced by the companies which are foreignly controlled. Yeah. So if you compare to the Western Europe or US, whatever, it's a absolutely double or even triple the average. So basically, and it was pointed out in 2008 by two scientists that is another model of economy here in the region. It's called dependent market economy. So on the one hand, we are growing very fast, but we take advantage of foreign direct investment.
Sure.
Which were literally flooding the region, and we ended up with very nice macroeconomic parameters, but at the expense of the ownership and control of the capital. So you should not be surprised that the ties with the Western Europe are so important for the countries, very smaller countries. And positioning in the value chain of the multinational corporations is an absolutely key thing. So, for example, Poland and Hungary is competing for outsourcing center for large U.S. conglomerate because there are very nice jobs there, but obviously this is outsourcing from the headquarters and so on. So the countries are very active in gaining this more and more this foreign direct investment. And how it's gonna play out in the future, I don't know. But that's why maybe it's the economic success of the region is not so well known worldwide, is that we do not have locally grown companies which are global. There are very few of them, and usually they are in the niches. I was doing research together with Slovenian friends, and we discovered 210 companies in the region 12 years ago, which have a top 3 rank globally in the respective industries, but most of them, if not all, were in the niche industries. Okay, so they are not mainstream. We don't have a Sony of the region. We don't have an automotive brand, Volkswagen of the region, although we produce a lot of Volkswagens. Basically, that's the second answer to second part of your question. And the third part of your question is the fundamental question in the economy: if localization and size matters for your economic development. Yeah. When I was a student, I was studying very carefully what was at this time called socioeconomic geography, because there was still thinking in a way that actually you are determined by your localization, by your geographic features, and then you can grow your economy this other way. But when we look at the more modern concept, it's rather this human capital plays the pivotal role. For your growth, and also the institutions, if they are inclusive, so people can make a career, most talented people on the merits or on other bases than merits. And it seems that this region is performing quite well, and Professor Piątkowski from World Bank showed that very nicely in his book on Polish economic growth, that mainly this very flexible social structure, enormous opportunities for development of talent was the key driver for Poland, and most probably for most of the countries of the region, not all. There are unfortunately some exceptions, was the main driver. And we benefited a lot from the very favorable demographics in 90s and at the beginning of 21st century. This edge is disappearing, by the way, because the demography of the region, and especially of Poland, is getting worse and worse. And I don't know what will be the future, but basically our competitive edge in terms of number of young people, well-educated and willing to work hard in the 90s was used quite well. Of course, there can be still discussion if it could have been used better, but it was used. And the last part of your question is this cooperation east-west or north-south, because this is basically a question.
Yeah.
And, when you look at the data, you see a lot of exports. 50% of Polish export is within the multinational corporations, so it's mainly West. There is even this economic system: you produce in Poland, you put made in Germany label on that, and you send it to China or to the US. This is of course true. But if you look at our issuers or our to-be issuers, hopefully at the Warsaw Stock Exchange, and we have more issuers than, for example, equity issuers than Deutsche Börse. So in terms of number of companies, we are quite rich in the issuers. They are when they expand, and most of them expand abroad, they start with the region. Yeah? So of course those companies are smaller, so in statistics you don't see that. but I think it's underestimated how important are ties in the region for the local companies which are slowly growing. And to build a global company is a German, Swiss, Swedish experience. You need 2 or 3 generations of managers. You cannot. It's very rarely that the first generation already is capable uh, of um, of building a global company. Usually it takes years and a lot of stamina, and on many instances you can sell your business and be rich for the next 4 generations. There are plenty of things which go between that ambitious goals. So it's very rare and very difficult to build a global company, and it requires 50 years plus. And from the transformation, we have 30 years. And the stock of capital is so limited that it might take us even longer than this 50 years.
That was a very concise answer to actually what was an incredibly broad question. Sorry for the breadth of the question, but that it leads me quite neatly into actually you've already started half answering the next question. What are the biggest challenges that lie ahead? You've already pointed out demography, um, and you've also pointed out that essentially we haven't had enough time yet. What are some of the other key challenges to continuing the economic growth, maintaining it, if that's even possible? I mean, is that track record of economic growth even maintainable?
In a nutshell, the major challenge is it's much easier to catch up than to run away. Everyone who was doing track and fields knows that very well. So basically, we are at the stage in the region that in some aspects we have to run away, and it's not that we impose whatever healthcare financing model from Germany. We take it one to one and implement it, and we are fine. But we have to work on our institutions as countries, and the question is if our civil servants are ready for that, and so on. And the corporate level is the same. You have to come up with the new products and not only copy the existing products and do it a little bit better and a little bit cheaper. So it's a fundamental problem of any economy which passed the stage when you have benefits of being underdeveloped. And I don't know if how it's gonna play out. You can build a very competitive economy like Finland and have very limited little growth. So in all parameters, you are very strong, but still you are not growing. So we might be
But
getting
also,
stronger.
Finland has to interrupt. Finland does have a sort of a mostly upper middle class society that lives on a very comfortable level.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they are simply rich, and the
Correct. Yeah.
question, put this blindly. I mean, so basically, the history of almost any country, you can see the evolution of successful country, or let's say, or nation, is that you start poor, you work hard, you try to save something. So when you work hard, you grow. And you save a little bit. So you have at the beginning only return on your labor force, but later on you save a little bit, so you start to have return on your capital. So you grow, and at the given point of time, you are effectively rich, but you still think you are poor. So you still work hard, although you have a stock of capital. And the same happens in Poland and in the region. In Slovenia or in Czechia happened even earlier than in Poland. In Poland
Sure.
now, almost 40% of people earn more, or can allow to save something. Yeah. So up from 5% 20 years ago. So it's a huge change. Yeah. So people start to accumulate the capital, but still they're working hard. In Slovenia, which is a very rich country, and in Czechia, which is also rich, it was earlier, but in Poland it was quite a recent phenomenon. For the last 5 years, people started to earn enough to save something. And this is the moment when either you keep on working hard and accumulating capital in this, Max Weber capitalist society, idealistic Protestant country. You have to, hard work even if you are rich, or you can go other way. What happens also in many countries in Western Europe, and to some extent to the US, although there's many difference because of the huge inequalities, social inequalities. But leaving this aside, You can either go into this way, hard working and reinvesting capital, or you can start spending more than you earn, so decreasing your stock of capital basically. And then I have, of course, I mean, Polish economy depends strongly on the Eurozone and so on, so I have all the best wishes for the Eurozone, but in the Eurozone you see something like this, at least on the country level, and when the countries are, except for Germany, are running huge deficits. So basically, they're spending more than they have. So they got more and more indebted. So they get effectively poorer. Yeah. So their net assets are decreasing because of the high debt. And what happens then, that at the end of this road you have you are not working hard, you deprivated, or you have a lower stock of capital because you are spending more than you earn, and at the end the only thing you have is reputation. It happened to many noble families in Poland in 18th century, when they were believing the prices of wheat were going down, so they were exploiting more their peasants, so to sell more of wheat to maintain their life standard. They were not able to maintain that, so they get indebted more and more, and many families bankrupted and so on, because they wanted to maintain their consumption level despite of much lower income. And the same can happen on the country level, on company level. So the everything what stays is your reputation, your name, whatever. And this is, of course, it's a sad development. And I don't know which direction will the region go. From my trips, and before pandemic I was traveling quite a lot, and we have Three Seas stock exchange conferences held 2 or 3 times. So I see still I see a lot of entrepreneurs who are working hard, and a lot of people who are still very ambitious, but I see also a second generation which is not of entrepreneurs which not necessarily wants to work that hard. They want to rather spend than earn. And this is, of course, makes me worry, and how it's gonna play out if we gonna keep the pace with the hard working, and we'll still overtaking the today's richer countries in the Western Europe. I don't know, but it strongly depends on the micro foundation, not a macroeconomic thing. So this is the biggest challenge. And there are some small challenges like infrastructure, but I think in other interviews you've heard a lot about this, why there is a problem. I believe that if there is a will, you find a solution, so it's a not bottleneck. I don't believe that if you have a great trading opportunity or investment opportunity or whatever across border, and you have to travel instead of 3 hours, 5 hours to your clients, you're still gonna travel there. So basically, I think the most prominent question mark around 3C's initiative is shall we be still able and willing and capable of working hard, and we have enough labor force or demographics.
Just to bounce back on one of the things you said in terms of more anecdote really than anything else, there is definitely a sentiment that there is. I mean, the data does reflect that the my generation, so somewhere between on the younger side of millennials and edging towards even towards Gen Z, it is the first generation in Western Europe and the Western world that will be overall worse off than their parents and their grandparents. And conversely, this is in Poland. The reverse is true, and I believe from just anecdotal evidence that this will be true across Central and Eastern Europe. So the entire region, where my generation will actually be marginally better off than our parents, and most certainly better off than our grandparents who were stuck behind the Iron Curtain and under communism.
Yeah, sure.
And from that perspective, there's a massive sense of, because it's very interesting what you said. What you said, obviously, you're speaking from the point of view of someone who deals with economics at a very different level than me. It's very interesting to hear your concerns about whether there will be the will to work in the generation of my generation, or whether simply we will, having sort of semi caught up, almost caught up, we just want to spend now. I think that there's a something that is very difficult to measure, but I think something that is actually very relevant, is this sense of enthusiasm. I do think that my generation has a sense of enthusiasm of there is a great sense of hope, in the sense that our country is, I'm speaking obviously from a Polish perspective, our country is going somewhere. There is a vague but still a goal of we can still be better off. We are still behind. We still have to catch up, and we are catching up. And that sense of hope and enthusiasm from we are better off than our parents. And the other thing that I think is a massive shift that will happen is that my generation growing up in Poland and becoming grown-ups in Poland will be the very first generation in something like 250 years to actually inherit anything from their parents, which is something that it's going to be such a fundamental shift just in the approach of Polish entrepreneurs and of Polish society, of actually the wealth that we accumulate can be handed on to our children without it being lost or destroyed or wrecked by whether it's the German Nazis invading or whether it's the communists coming in and confiscating it all. So I think to answer just from a sort of anecdotal basis, really, some of the questions that you yourself asked of what's going to happen, I have a very profound sense of enthusiasm and hope. Just to sort of, but that's just an aside. Moving on.
Hopefully, you're right. Yeah.
Hopefully, what's the role that Poland should play in the Three Cs process and of the process of speeding up economic cooperation in the region?
So first of all, we have a long-standing tradition of somehow moderating the cooperation in the region. We have to take into account that in 1604, so the peak of the power of Poland, so just before conquering Moscow and Russian Empire at this time, Moscow Empire. Poland was the fifth largest economy of the world and third largest in Europe. Yeah? So basically, there were times where Poland was extremely powerful, and compared to the other colonial empires, we were the country we were living was called Commonwealth of Poland and Lithuania. Yeah? So for two nations. So first we have a tradition of building up or consolidated the nations, or nations, a very modern concept, but some consolidation in terms of politics and economy of the region on the equal basis, not force, as the French call it, so not with the power and sword and fire. Yeah, so that's the huge difference of our legacy is completely different than the colonial states, and we should somehow I see it in a very similar way now. So we can build up cooperation, we can start initiative, we can do plenty of things, we can have a joint, as we have infrastructure fund to invest in the region and so on and so on, but it should be always with in a partnership mode, not in a colonial mode. But it's very difficult. It can be, I can tell you, even in the small world of exchanges, it's very difficult because there are some national interest and also there are some disparities. If the other exchange is very small, they might fear that the bigger exchange, like our exchange, that's why I gave you this insight on the relative trading volume size. It's a little bit scary. And also, it's quite obvious that it's not an empty space. There's very pronounced economic interests of various powers, regional powers, superpowers in the region. And nobody, and it's not straightforward that Poland should increase its role in the region. It's up to us if we can manage that. And based on what you just said about this ambition, I think we can do this. We are a can-do nation, but it will take time and a lot of stamina. And this is and perspiration, and this is the weak spot, that we are very good in actions, but we are not very systematic in the way how we treat our neighbors. The same was in the between wars period. that we are constantly, every government had another policy how to deal with Ukrainians and Rus and Belarus today we would call them. So basically, we have a very clear view on NATO, EU, and so on, our political class. But if we have a real clear view across the political spectrum on how to go around, let's say, free seas initiative as a concept, I'm not sure that. So
It
this
does
is
actually
this
feel like
requires a change, and maybe your generation gonna change that.
I actually, just to bounce in, I was going to say that it feels like there isn't really a very clear-cut strategy at all around the three Cs. Of it's more that yes, there's infrastructural projects that need to be done because there's a disparity between the north-south axis and the east-west axis, and that has to be caught up. But aside from that, it does feel that the project is very much sort of undefined, really, beyond let's build some pipelines, some bridges, and some roads and some railways.
Yeah, I mean, we have to step into the shoes of the politicians. So it's a road or a pipeline is a very tangible effect. Yeah, so you can show in democracy, especially media or social media based democracy, you need a clear picture. You need a one. Very nice sentence, statement or mot, which can be forwarded, and so it's very difficult. So we have to be realistic and not idealistic about politics. Politics is about gaining and executing power. So that's the way. We will not change the world, but in, in, in I mean, I don't like the expression mature democracy, says Polish democracy started 500 years ago. So actually, and 9 to 11% of population were allowed to vote like 400 years ago, and so on. So basically, I'm telling about the rather countries with more or more experience or more tenured multi-generation civil servants. And this is the way on the level of directors in the ministry and so on, where the policies, not politics, is done. We should be more clear about our role in the region and what we want to achieve, and step by step we should do this. And we do it to some extent. For example, when current government is investing heavily in scholarship for the foreign students who want to study in Poland and so on. So there are first signs of that, but continuity is very important, and to be systematic in what you do, and not from the one opening of one bridge or the other, but do it on a everyday basis.
And just to sort of to conclude off, I think that the achievements of the last 33 years in Poland and what has been done, and the incredible shift in society and how much has been accomplished in this time, really gives me a huge, if this is any metric to go by for the next 30 years, then one can only be really optimistic and hopeful of what's coming next. Because I think a tremendous amount of things has been achieved. And I don't think that, in fact, I think most Poles, when you're part of a process and you don't take that step back to look at the process, and you just get used to it because it's sort of, well, day by day, and you don't really notice that anything's changed at all, because you're so involved in the change on a sort of such a small day by day basis. But if you take that step back and you look at it, the shift is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, it's an incredible story. So if that's the metric to go by, I can only be optimistic.
Yeah, I can only agree with you. A German professor who is visiting Poland from time to time, but on a regular basis, he said one thing is astonishing in Warsaw, that every time I come to Warsaw, there's a new skyscraper, and you don't notice it.
You don't notice it when you're living here.
They're building something. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So absolutely, I fully agree with you. But I can share with you one other insight. In Back in 1997, we started student consulting company, first in the region, which was part of the network of junior enterprises, European network. And in 1999, we were doing international project for one top employer, let's call the company like this. In 5 or more countries, we are studying what are the preferences of the students when it comes to employer selection and so on. And in France, top was, let's say, Danone, Renault,
Sure.
this kind of French companies. And on the fifth slot was, let's say, McKinsey.
Okay.
Okay. In Germany, it was Daimler, whatever, and some other. And on the slot 4 was McKinsey. On slot 5 was Randberger, all the way around. Yeah. And so on and so on. And Poland, it was Arthur Andersen, McKinsey, BCG. No Polish companies among top 20. And now when and fast forward, I teach at the Warsaw School of Economics, so I have 100 students per semester. I teach microeconomics, so basically I talk to the students, and I actually I teach in English, but I have also a group of Polish students, and they say, yeah, our dream job is to have a startup. Of course, very heavily financed job places currently by the government are in startups, and if not startup, maybe before I start my own company, I would like to gain some experience in a Polish company which goes global. Yeah, so basically it's a complete shift. Yeah, so it's a generation shift. My generation was really the dream was to get a decent job at the global corporation, and now there are a group of ambitious people who would go for even lower salary, but for exciting job at the Polish global company, which competes with other global players, or they can start a new company. So it's a complete shift of priorities, and it's very, very promising. But how it's gonna play out, if we will maintain our ambition, and we will be taking over another economies in this chart up to top 5 in the world, what was in 1604, I don't know.
And on that happy, optimistic note, thank you very much, Marek. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions.